Hey, Julie Gunlock, it's good to see you in studio today.
Thanks for having me.
My pleasure, as always. And it's interesting, your latest piece of the Washington Examiner, we were actually talking about this subject yesterday, so I'm glad that you're here. I'm glad that you've written about this. While Obama pushed restorative justice in schools, you write, the Parkland shooter got a free pass. And he was far from the only one, it sounds like.
Right. In 2014, Arne Duncan, who was Obama's Department of Education secretary, issued a memo to all schools saying that they wanted to cut down on what the Obama administration called the school to prison pipeline, which they suggested was that and if you look at the data from the Department of Education, it's true that more children of color and children with learning disabilities receive more detentions and expulsions and suspensions. And in there, look, I think there was a lot of sort of heart-right theory here that these kids who are always in trouble or are always sort of facing, detentions or some sort of discipline are the ones that end up quitting school, maybe trying drugs, dealing drugs, and then in jail, and turning to crime in jail. And so they wanted to cut down on that. And underlying this is the suggestion that teachers that dole out these punishments are racist, and that the unevenness that you would see in this data was because of racism. Well, that's not entirely true. These are very complicated matters, but without going down that road, the suggestion was from Arne Duncan was that they would stop basically traditional methods of discipline, which again are suspensions and detentions and expulsions, and also when a student is violent, calling in the police, alerting the police. So if a student assaults another student or assaults a teacher or brings in a weapon or makes a threat, before this guidance was issued, you would call the police. The police would be alerted. The police might come in. They might assess the situation and decide this student really needs to be arrested. Charges need to be brought. Well, again, in 2014, this was reversed, and in Broward County, they were so now the Robert Runcie, who's continues, has not resigned, I might add. In 2013, so the year before, he started sort of a similar program called, I can't remember what it was called, but he started another program that basically mirrored the guidance that came out from Arne Duncan. And again, they had worked together.
I think it's called Promise.
Promise, yes. And these two had worked together. So Robert Runcie was ahead of the game here. He started it's called restorative justice. And the idea behind that is that the victim and the bully, so the person the perpetrator and the victim sit down and talk it out, which that's got to be a lot of fun for the victim. And there's other things. There's like creating peer guidance systems, where peers talk to other peers, and there's mediation instead of actual punishment. Okay. Now what happened is yes, the rates went down. The rates of detentions and suspensions and all of this traditional methods of discipline. Yes, the rates went down. But it also allowed students like Nicholas Cruz to fall through the gaps because when he threatened other students, when he assaulted other students, when he brought weapons to school, the police were not alerted. And so here you have another case of a failure on the part of Broward County, but actually a failure that was sort of set up by the Obama administration. And there have been very little calls to really re-examine this idea of restorative justice. So my article really examines this, talks about the problems with restorative justice policies in schools and how because we've gotten so far away from traditional discipline measures, and we've gotten away from the idea of alerting the police and bringing them in, we've really made these children vulnerable. This is a school safety issue, and this is another area where parents need to be focusing not on gun control.
Absolutely. In fact, Paul Sperry at Real Clear Investigations did a deep dive into some of these numbers, and what he found is that within 2 years after this Promise program went into effect, the recidivism rate in Broward County surged, he said,
right.
Became higher than the state's average, right? He also said that juvenile arrests for murder and manslaughter increased 150% in Broward County between 2013 and 2016, increasing another 50% in 2017. Armed robbery among juveniles up 46% from 2013. Arrests for auto thefts jumped 170%. Because one of the things that happened with this Promise program, it wasn't just that the Broward sheriff said, okay, if there are calls that would have come into the school, then we'll engage in restorative justice. This was done for crimes outside of school hours too. This was basically a pass for juveniles. And as Paul Sperry says, after this program began, fights broke out virtually every day in classrooms, hallways, cafeterias, and campuses across the district. Last year, more than 3,000 fights erupted in the district's 300-plus schools, including the altercations involving the shooter there in Parkland, Florida. No brawlers were arrested, he writes, even after their third fight, and even if they sent other children to the hospital.
Yeah. It's astonishing to me.
That's amazing.
It's astonishing to me. And if you have your kids in the public school system right now, as I do, and as I know you do, all the administration talks about is safety first, safety first, safety first, safety first, and then which is kind of galling in and of itself, because the next sentence is usually something about restorative justice, which you're not protecting these kids. I mean, if Nicholas Cruz, if the police had been called on the many assaults that he had made of other students, the threats he had made, or the fact that he had brought weapons in, if the local police had been called in, he might have been arrested. He might have gone before a judge, and that might have required him to go through a mental health evaluation, and then maybe perhaps been committed, because he was clearly sick. Instead, the police were never involved. Broward County handled it internally. And the other thing that I talk about in my piece, which I think is really critical, is I brought up a young Parkland student who talked about how she tried to befriend Nicholas Cruz. And she talks about how she was part of this peer mentoring program where she was supposed to tutor him. These teachers knew he was violent. One of the teachers, I actually quoted one of the teachers at the school, who said, I didn't want to be alone. I didn't want to be alone with Nicholas Cruz. He creeped me out that much. And yet they had a program in place where a young girl who had been assaulted by him was left alone in a room to tutor him. She talks about how she was sexually harassed, how he ogled her, how he verbally harassed her. And so much for protecting the innocent students of Parkland. I don't know why Robert Runcie has not resigned. I guess it's the same reason I don't understand why Scott Israel hasn't resigned. I mean, the arrogance of the officials in Broward County, it's really astonishing. I really hope that the citizens of Broward are kind of taking note of these policies that were put in place far before Parkland happened and really examining the failures.
I think more and more of them are, and I applaud the work of folks like you and Paul Sperry who are, actually reporting on this, because, this is really serious. I mean, this is everything from, as you say, these daily fights in schools to potential school shooters. Sperry said that in October of 2016, a potential school shooter was thwarted at Coral Springs High School, thanks to a student who alerted a school resource officer after spotting a gun in the waistband of a former student who had entered the cafeteria. The 17-year-old former student, Ryan Trollinger, allegedly planned to give the loaded 9mm handgun to an enrolled friend who authorities said planned to use the weapon for a, quote, massive school shooting. The other student, a juvenile who was not identified, reportedly wrote in a journal, I want to be the worst school shooter in America, worse than Columbine, Virginia Tech, and Sandy Hook. That's what he wrote. Trollinger got 15 days detention, counseling, and community service, and the would-be shooter was sent for psychiatric evaluation, was not charged with a crime.
Yeah, look, I'm going to tell you. Yeah, look, I'm going to tell you. I went to the orientation of my child's new school. He's going to be there in this new school next year, and it's a public school. And the principal blathered on for a good 10 minutes about how proud he is of the restorative justice programs that he has implemented. He is a school principal. Is he not looking at this data? Is he not looking at the lessons of Broward County? So, yes, I applaud Sperry and others that are reporting on this as well, but it is really disgusting to me that school officials that are in charge of, the safety of these students don't seem to be aware of these failures in Broward, and don't seem to be. In fact, they're still bragging about these systems that failed the kids of Parkland.
Absolutely. Julie Gunlock, again, I appreciate you coming on the program. Now, can we end on a lighter note?
Yeah, I'm sweating.
I know this is really, what we talk about is really important, but
yeah.
But I also saw this story. Kyle Morgan sent this along a couple of days ago, and this is amazing. So there was a teacher. This was in the school district of Lancaster in PA, and they had their Pennsylvania standardized testing, right? So there was a teacher, Kyle Byler. He's an 8th grade social studies teacher, And he decided, all right, I'm going to make these kids pancakes while they're taking the standardized test. And he made them a whole grain pancake so that they could, get a little bit of extra nutrition and brain power and power through these standardized tests. And he was suspended by the school district for making pancakes.
Monster.
He said that he was suspended without pay after being disciplined for making whole grain pancakes for his students while they took the exam because this was supposedly a distraction for the students. And there was talk that Kyle Byler was actually going to be fired
Oh, wow.
for making pancakes.
Oh,
But
wow.
a school board spokesman says there was never any, quote, dismissal action on the school board's agenda. And about 100 concerned residents showed up Tuesday night at the school board meeting in support of the pancake-making teacher. And it looks like he's going to be back at work. So he's still suspended without pay for making those pancakes, but he hasn't lost his job. I guess that's the silver lining.
That is amazing. Yeah, you have school districts like, and school superintendents like Robert Runcie who still have their job, but Pancake Guy is on suspension. That makes makes a ton of sense. Yeah.
Isn't that nuts? I mean, but I guess there you go. Sums up the state of education today.
Right.
All right, Julie Gunlock. Wow, I thought that was going to be a
You
happier
didn't
note
end on
than
a
it ended
happy.
up being,
You've like made me
I
more
know.
mad. I need like a blood pressure pill right now. Yeah.
Go get a pancake. Maybe a Dutch baby.
That's a good idea.
Yeah, there you go. Julie Gunlock joined us from the Independent Women's Forum here on Cam and Company.